best Fender is the cheapest Fender. If you've seen my previous videos, you know all about my Fender journey. Please don't come at me with rational arguments against Fender. I know this fixation is irrational. Partly it comes down to my age. When I was first learning the instrument in the early 1990s, basses fell into three categories: Fender, cheap Fender knockoffs, and ultra-modern high-end designs. Of course, there's also Gibson, but come on. Fender has always been my choice. Why I took this journey? A lot of has happened in the past few years, and the quest for the best Fender bass has been an emotional outlet for me. I've tried many Fenders, from the intermediate level Made in Mexico Player Series up to the highest end, the American Ultra, coming in well over $2,000. They've pretty much all had problems. Fender's current quality control in both their Mexico and US factories is middling at best. I don't expect perfection in a $700 instrument, even if I do want it. But I do expect something approaching perfection in a $2,000 instrument, and that was decidedly not the case. My American Ultra Jazz bass had a sticky D-tuner, a weird issue with the design of the neck and bridge combination that prevented a decent setup without shimming on a brand new instrument, and the most nondescript pickups I've ever heard. It just didn't sound like a jazz bass. It wasn't fun to play, and it bothered me that I had spent so much money on it. What about Squier? Squier is another matter. Fender's entry to intermediate level subsidiary brand, which contracts out production to third-party factories in Indonesia and China, has been delivering exceptional quality in recent years, and their most expensive instruments top out at around $550. My Fender journey has, ironically, led to me currently owning 4 different Squier instruments, and I love them all. I've done some modding on the 2 40th anniversary vintage edition basses, not because they needed it, but just for fun, and because the stakes are lower. As for my 2 newest Squiers, a Classic Vibe Bass 6 and a J Mascis signature Jazzmaster guitar, they were basically perfect right out of the box. All I did was swap on some new strings. So just get over Fender already. A lot of people have suggested I should give up on Fender and try another brand, frequently mentioning Squier. So, I did. I bought a Squier P8. I made a video extolling its virtues. Initially I loved it, but problems quickly emerged. The first was probably a me problem. I didn't like the knobs. They felt cheap. The stacked ones were too tall. They rubbed together and felt like they would get bent, putting the instrument into and out of the gig bag repeatedly. I think that may have actually happened. But it was the other problem that destroyed the instrument for me. It cut out completely in the middle of a gig. Further inspection revealed the problem was a design flaw with the output jack. The terminal pin is really thin and flimsy, and easily got bent out of alignment just with about a month's worth of moderate use. Yes, you can swap out a jack, but Squier's jacks have a weird design, and I'm not sure a standard jack would have fit without drilling a larger hole in the body. The bottom line is, it was a deal breaker for me. I could never trust this instrument after that incident. Still, the Squier was better than the other non-Fender bass I tried, a Schecter Stiletto Studio. It's the only bass I've ever owned with a modern design. It felt really great to play and sounded amazing, but again there were 2 major issues. The first was that it only had an active mode, which meant always relying on 2 9-volt batteries, which isn't so bad in itself, but the battery compartment had a terrible design. The battery cover didn't pop open. It was held on by 2 screws that were screwed directly into the bodywood. Eventually those screw holes were going to be a problem. Even worse, the battery cavity itself was so tight that you needed to use a spudger to pry the batteries out. Have fun doing that if it dies in the middle of a gig. Maybe that's why it had studio in the name. And there was another flaw that really befuddled me. I'm not sure if it was a design defect, miswiring, or just shoddy assembly, but the pan pot could not be turned all the way to one end or the other. It seemed like a logical feature if you wanted to solo one pickup, but turning it all the way would cause the instrument to cut out completely. Both of these instruments convinced me that as long as I'm playing in the sub $1,000 market, I'm really only interested in Fender or Squier, because for all of my complaints, Fender has never had problems like these. And so to F, as in Fender. I've bought and sold, or returned, several Fender Player Series instruments because they all had little or sometimes not so little issues. The fretless Jazz is a good example. The neck was misaligned, and the fingerboard edges had rough, jagged bits of polyurethane overflow. I really liked how it sounded, but those issues bugged me enough that I promptly returned it. That left me convinced that I would only be satisfied with an American Fender, so I decided to take the plunge one last time, earlier this year, with a mod shop precision bass of my own quote-unquote design. It was another case of an instrument that simply could not live up to my expectations. But it's not just my pickiness. It was really clear that QC is even worse on mod shop instruments than on production Fenders. It was absolutely slapped together as quickly as possible. I hated the V-Mod pickups it came with, so I upgraded them. And I lined the cavities with copper foil tape since it had no shielding at all. But even after all of that TLC, I couldn't make myself love it. So after a few months, I sold it. I had really, finally, given up on Fender. Completely, I thought. Then, out of nowhere, Player Series instruments went on sale for 15% off. I've always loved the seafoam green finish, and it was available on the Player Jaguar with a maple fretboard, also my preferred choice. I was never that excited about the Player Series at $800, but for $680, I'll give it another chance. This color combo was already out of stock, both with Fender themselves and with Sweetwater, but I found one on Chicago Music Exchange, and I got what was apparently their last unit. They were showing as out of stock shortly after I placed my order. I figured even if I don't absolutely love it, I'm not out that much for it. Never mind all of the money I've squandered selling those other instruments at a loss over the past few years. I was on a journey, damn it. When it arrived, I was floored. No body flaws, great feeling neck, and best of all, the pickups sound amazing. It's not perfect. There's a weird little bulge on the pickguard, like one of the screw holes is 0.5 millimeter out of alignment. The tuners only feel adequate. And there's a slight bit of rough metal on the neck plate. I didn't notice that until I snagged my shirt on it during a gig. But again, for under $700, I can deal with all of it. And that's when it finally hit me. The best Fender is the cheapest Fender. Leo Fender may have invented the solid body electric bass guitar, and the iconic Fender designs may be what every guitar company at all price levels tries to copy these days. But that does not make Fender a luxury brand. Fender is like the Toyota of guitar companies. Well, some might say it's the Yugo of guitar companies. Buying the most expensive Fender is like buying the most expensive Toyota. You can do it, but if you have the money for that, you'd probably be happier buying a true luxury brand. I wasn't happy with those expensive Fenders because expensive Fenders are not worth the money. But a cheap Fender can be great, if you set your expectations accordingly. I say can because that's the other hurdle I've had to overcome. I'm an introvert, and the idea of going into a guitar store for a few hours, talking up the staff, trying out a bunch of different instruments, etc., is something I viscerally dread. Please do not try to explain to me why I'm wrong about that. If you're not an introvert, you don't get it. The problem with buying instruments online is, no matter how automated the manufacturing process becomes, every musical instrument is unique. Every tree is different. Instruments made of wood carry the unique history of the trees they're made from. I'm not going to get all metaphysical here. I don't believe in the mystical properties of tone wood. I'm just saying that uniform, consistent quality in musical instrument production is a myth. However you go about it, you've got to try out a lot of different instruments to find the one that best suits you, whatever your criteria might be. By this point, I've tried several Fender Player Series instruments, and the Made in Mexico Fender Standard line that preceded them, and honestly, most of them were not great. So I'm not here to say, yes, the Fender Player Jaguar bass is an amazing instrument you absolutely must buy. First of all, I think Fender may be discontinuing the line, so before long you might have to head to the secondary market for them anyway. What I am saying is that after a lot of effort and way too much money spent, I have, at long last, found a bass with the Fender logo on the headstock that I really enjoy playing and owning, and I think I'm going to stick with it. But you better ask me again in a month.